on, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Brewing with 50 Bucks. This is the show where we take your favorite commanders, we slap on a $50 budget, and not only do we make a deck that is functional, but one that is also able to win you the game. My name is Stefan, I'm coming to you from the General Warfare headquarters. Glad you can join us today, as we are finally going to be taking a look at one of the new commanders from Magic's newest set, Dominaria United. And yes, I did miss last week, and this was initially supposed to be for last week, but I decided to take a week off for my birthday. I've officially completed 30 years around the sun. So, I decided to take that week off, but we're back at it for a little bit of work and a little bit of deck discussion. So, we are going to be tackling one of the more popular commander options that we found from Dominaria United. We took a look through all the possible commanders we found, and we also looked at EDH rec for some needed help, and we found one of the most popular ones, and one I wanted to challenge myself on with. So, without further ado, we're going to take a look in this week's video on Ivy, Gleeful Spelltheif. So as of right now, Ivy is currently sitting with 762 decks created on EDH Rec. It is now the second most popular built commander in Dominaria United, which is actually probably a cool thing because Ivy is one of those commanders that's very unique to themselves, and Ivy does very much provoke cantrips and some spicy auras and other modifications that not only can alter your creatures, but Ivy as well. So without further ado and enough talking, we're going to take a look at Ivy in the commander breakdown and the deck strategies going into this. So, Ivy Gleeful Spelltheif is a 2/1 for green and blue, so Simic colors, for a legendary fairy rogue with flying, and its ability, whenever a player casts a spell that targets only a single creature other than Ivy Gleeful Spelltheif, you may copy that spell. The copy targets Ivy, and in parentheses, a copy of an aura spell becomes a token. So with that, this opens up the floodgates for any kind of different builds you can do with Ivy, whether it's going to be auras, whether it's going to be cantrips, whatever you may see, this opens up the door valuably for Ivy. And so the main focus and the main deck strategy of this deck is to have Ivy and another creature on the field themselves. Then you start stacking up those modifications and ultimately put the fear of God into your opponents with big swings and possible completion. And as always, we build these decks with a budget of $50 in mind, which includes the price of the commanders, which excludes the price of the basic lands, and we also offer a $5 overage compromise. So this deck can ultimately be built for $50, but the compromise is available for those who could spare the extra $5 to make this deck a little bit cooler and a little bit spicier. The link to the tapped out deck list will be in the show notes down below. And if I can ask of you guys for one small little favor, if you like this kind of content, please consider liking this video, sharing amongst your play group, and whoever else you might know who likes this kind of content. Subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon. Thank you very much. And we're going to look through this deck in the standard array of categories. All 6 of our main categories we're going to be looking at is going to be through our instants, our enchantments, our lands, our creatures, our sorceries, and our artifacts. And as always, we like to start with the most cumbersome of categories, but fear not, if there's any one part you want to take a look at more inclusively, there are going to be chapters in this video so that way you can skip through wherever you want to go in this video. But we're going to start off with the most cumbersome of categories, which is going to be our creatures. Our creature base is going to be probably the biggest one out of all of them, as you're going to see why in just a little bit, but we're running about 26 creatures themselves, so a little bit over 1/4 of our deck is going to be devoted to creatures themselves. So enough talking, we're going to start off with Augmenter Pugilist. So with this, it's a 3-mana, 3/3 Troll Druid that has trample, and as long as you control 8 or more lands, Augmenter Pugilist gets +5/+5, which all by itself is kind of meh, and you might wonder why we're adding this kind of card in the deck, but it is a dual-face card, a modal dual-face card, and we could flip it to this other side, which is Echoing Equation. For 5 mana, it's a sorcery that you can choose target creature you control. Each other creature you control becomes a copy of it until end of turn, except those creatures aren't legendary if the chosen creature is legendary. So this is the card that I mainly added in for this deck. But for that Echoing Equation, no matter how many creatures you have on the field, every single one can actually target. If you choose Ivy with it, every single one of your creatures turns into Ivy Gleeful Spelltheif, and that way, when you're going to be swinging down your spells, attaching your auras, or throwing down any other modifications on there, the main Ivy will see each and every other Ivy, and each one of them will copy the spell or copy the aura or any modification attached to it. So that way you'll be jacking up your forces for one turn, and you can basically, like I mentioned in the beginning, put the fear of God in your opponents. Auspicious Starix is next. It's a 5-mana 6/6 elk beast with mutate. So mutate is one of the reasons why I mentioned we have so many creatures. As when this creature mutates, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile X permanent cards, where X is the number of times this creature has mutated. You put those permanent cards onto the battlefield. Now, think about it this way. You have already an Augmentor Pugilist or another one of the creatures we're going to be going through this in the deck. You cast the Auspicious Starix for its mutate cost. You put it on one of those creatures. Ivy will see that on the creature and it'll make a copy for themselves. So you'll also mutate onto Ivy with the copied Starix, and that way you're going to be getting 2 mutate triggers off it as well. So you're going to be getting double the value off it, 1, and 2, you're going to be getting more permanents on the field if you mutate the Auspicious Starix, and each other time you mutate it too. So this is just exceptional value for Ivy and for yourself. So, about 1.5 years ago, while we're on the subject of mutate, I actually built a deck tech specifically around the mutate mechanic. You can see that video on the top right of your screen right now. Go click it after this one or save it for in your next tab so that way you can watch it after you watch this one. Blight Mamba is next. So, this is where the fun begins. It's a 1/1 for 2 mana for a snake that has Infect. So this deck is based on a bunch of things. Mutate one of them, Infect is another one. That's why I made the complete joke a little bit earlier. But even with stuff like mutates and auras and cantrips, you can buff up all your mutate stuff. That way they are going to be incredulously difficult to deal with. And for the matter of a copying onto Ivy as well, you're going to have a very, very scary board, to say the least. And one of the main reasons that Blight Mamba is in this deck is to provide that extra coverage and extra scariness with Infect, as we'll see a little bit later with a couple of other creatures. Coiling Oracle is next. It's going to be a standard card that we're going to be adding in this deck, as it's pretty much a good, solid standard card you'd add in any generic Simic deck, only for the fact that when it enters the battlefield, you reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, you put that card into your hand. So you're netting yourself an extra card or an extra land off the top of your library. And the land will come into play untapped, which is significant in this case, because if you're missing a land and you get that land drop off the Coiling Oracle, that way you can play some more spells, more cantrips, and more scary stuff on Ivy. Dreamtail Heron is next. This is another mutate card, but this one for 4, and then whenever this one mutates, you draw a card. What I forgot to mention before with mutate is that when you mutate the creature, you can actually choose the order in which it goes on, whether it's either if the Heron goes in front or in back of the creature. Either way, when it's mutated, the creature will retain all abilities from every creature underneath it. So whenever you mutate this one, and if you mutate the Auspicious Starix underneath it, you'll get the Starix ability off too, and you'll also get the extra card draw from the Heron as well. Elvish Mystic is next. We want some mana dorks. We want some extra mana acceleration in this deck, so I figured some mana dorks will be perfect for the job. Fine Horned Elves is next. I can just make the copy-paste same example for this one. We just want a couple of extra little mana dorks to help us accelerate and get us to start casting our crazy stuff early on. Gem Razor is next, another mutate card, this one for 3 mana to mutate it, Reach and Trample, and when this creature mutates, destroy target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. So with this one, this nets you a lot of not only hate, but it also nets you some significant advantage. That way, whenever you're mutating stuff on top, and especially if you're mutating this on another creature and Ivy copies it and puts it on top of them, you're getting to hit 2 either artifacts or enchantments, or one of each. That way you can basically take control of the board with just one card. It's significant enough. It's almost like a Return to Dust, or it's almost like a Crush Contraband in this case, except instead of exile, it's destroy, but it gives you the same kind of advantage in that way as well. Glade Cover Scout is next. So this is where the other fun stuff comes into play. So with this, we also, especially for mutate cards, we want stuff that is small and has hexproof. Why? Because that way our opponents can't target it, and once we start mutating it on top of them, they can't stop the mutation unless they're countering it. But if you mutate it on top of that, and we have Ivy on the field, you're gonna get some double mutates, you're gonna get some double fun stuff, and you're gonna get some double scary stuff on top. Glistener Elf is next. Not hexproof, but it's a 1/1 infect. So we're gonna have some, if you play this first turn, your opponents will know immediately what to expect from this deck, and rightfully so. Glowstone Recluse is next. A 2/3 with mutate, this one for mutate 4 mana, 3 and a green, with reach, and when this creature mutates, you put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So this is where we're going to derive some of our power on top of this. With this, whenever we're mutating the Glowstone Recluse, or whenever Recluse mutates a second or whatever, how many times it already does, you're going to be adding some extra power and extra toughness on your creatures, whether it be just Ivy or it just be one of your other creatures you attach it to. Ichor Clawmere is next, 1/1 infect, and when this becomes blocked, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. So another infect card. As you can see, we're going the infect route this way. We basically want to put as much advantage into our infect cards as we want to with any other one of our many plethora of ways of winning. Llanowar Elves is next. I'll make the copy-paste argument for Llanowar Elves, as I mentioned already, for Gunhorn Elves and Elvish Mystic. It's just an extra mana dork that helps us accelerate a little bit. Marrowleaf Pixie is next. This one is actually a 2 mana dork, but this one actually adds one of our main commander's colors. So that way, if we're not going to be completely mana screwed, instead of just having just one color generically. Migratory Greathorn is next. Another mutate card, this one for mutate 2 and a green. And when this creature mutates, you search your library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tap. Then shuffle your library. So easy enough. Whenever this mutates, you're going to be ramping a bunch with this. So anytime you mutate this, and whenever you mutate any other of the other mutate cards, or you stack them up, that stack is going to get bigger and bigger, and you're going to have so much value on top of it. Paradise Druid is next. Another little mana dork. This one a 2 mana dork, but for this one you add 1 color of any mana. Sorry, 1 mana of any color, and it's hexproof as long as it's untapped. So we can protect the Paradise Druid as much as we want, as long as it's untapped. But when it becomes tapped, all bets are off, but it helps you accelerate with any mana of your choice. Pouncing Shore Shark is next. This another one with mutate, but this one is one of my favorite ones as it has flash, which if you've seen this channel before, you know my undying love for cards with flash. And whenever this creature mutates, you may return target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand. So you can basically stop attacks. You can force your opponents to replay their generals, or if you're about to dive to one of your opponent's creatures, you could just Shore Shark it away. And the best part is, Ivy can copy it, and you Shore Shark another card away too. Excellent value, what I would probably say. Putrefax is next, and you guys kind of saw this one coming. Putrefax is going to be the ultimate infect card in our deck. It's a 5/3 with trample and haste and infect, and at the end step we have to sacrifice the Putrefax. But if we're able to do fun stuff with the Putrefax first, then this makes it all worth it, as Putrefax already is 5 power and it has trample and infect. So if we're able to bunch it up with a bunch of modifications like +1/+1 counters or other things like it, that's going to be our aim to buff up the Putrefax, but ultimately speaking, wipe our opponent out and make them complete. Rotwolf is next. Another infect card, but this one's a 2/2, and when a creature dealt damage by Rotwolf this turn is put into a graveyard, you can draw a card. So, with this, how infect works is in the same vein as Wither. So with that, if a creature blocks, instead of just them taking the damage, it'll provide -1/-1 counters on them. And for each, whenever the -1/-1 counters stack up to where the creature's toughness becomes 0, that's when the creature dies. And whenever that creature dies that way, especially done by Rotwolf, you get to draw that extra card. It's effective to 1 and 2. It's good early pressure for our opponents, on our opponents, I should say. That way we can keep them at bay with some infect cards. Sawtusk Demolisher is next. It's a 6/6 for 6 mana. This one having mutate 4 with trample, and when this creature mutates, destroy target non-creature permanent. The controller creates a 3/3 green beast creature token. So this takes the best parts of Terracodon and Beast Within. So basically it Terracodons away something that's a non-creature permanent, so you can hit lands, you can hit artifacts, enchantments, whatever, as long as it's not a creature, and they get a 3/3 Beast token in the process. And I'll make the same copy-paste example as I mentioned before. If Ivy's on the field as well, that'll copy onto it, and you get a second trigger off the Sawtux Demolisher. Sea Dasher Octopus is next, another mutate card, this one for 1 and a blue, again with flash. And when this creature deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. So this one doesn't follow the mutate stack as the other previous examples do. However, this can be put on to a creature at any point in time. Whenever a creature goes into combat and is not blocked, you can bet that the Sea Dasher Octopus can be mutated on that creature to get an extra card draw for your turn. Slippery Boggle is next. It's a 1-mana hexproof for 1/1. So make the same copy-paste argument for Gladecover Scout, where Slippery Boggle will give us an early on advantage for us to start mutating our creatures onto something, especially with Ivy on the field. That way we'll get some extra mutates and we'll get some extra cover on top of it as well. Souvenir Snatcher is next, a 4/4 for 5 mana with mutate 6 that has flying, and when this creature mutates, gain control of target non-creature artifact. So I kind of like this card for the fact that you can steal soul rings, you can steal mana rocks, you can steal any valuable creature, and if I'm not mistaken, as long as vehicles are not crewed, you can steal those too. Let me know in the comments down below, but I'm fairly certain you can steal vehicles if they're not crewed. Nonetheless, Souvenir Snatcher does follow the mutate stack, so as long as you have other stacked mutate cards, this will follow the stack as well. Trumpeting Gnar is next, a 3/3 for 3 mana with mutate 5, but this one is 3 and hybrid green and blue. So you can pay either 2 blue, 2 green, or a combination of the two. But when this creature mutates, you create a 3/3 green beast creature token. So in place of what the Sawtux Demolisher does and gives our opponents 3/3 green beasts, we get the 3/3 green beasts instead. So that way, whenever it mutates on the stack as well, we get those beasts to put some extra cover and some extra pressure on our opponents. Wilson, Refined Grizzly is next. Hey, he made his triumphant return in his videos. A 2/2 for 2 mana that it can't be countered, has Vigilance, Reach and Trample, and Ward 2. The reason why I'm adding this into the deck is kind of the same vein as why I'm running the Slippery Boggle and the Gladecover Scout. This does technically have a form of hexproof with Ward, but they have to pay some extra mana to target Wilson. And even so, it's going to be a good fodder for our mutate cards to put on there so that Ivy can copy them as well. And the last of our creatures is going to be Wood Elves. It's a standard green card that you put in almost every single green deck, where whenever it comes into play, you search your library for a forest card, put that card into the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. Next category we're going to be getting into is our Instants. We're going to be running 16 Instants in this deck, and we want that fast interaction. That way we can get the most value off Ivy's ability and the most value for our creatures to get in for a little bit of extra spicy damage. First card we're going to be throwing out there is Counterspell. The classic, the all-around counterspell for 2 mana counter target spell. Decisive Denial is next. 2 mana again, but instead with this one, you can either have target creature you control fight target creature you don't control, or counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 3. So that bit of flexibility with Decisive Denial allows it to not only just counter spells, but also allows us to remove some creatures if we need to get rid of some stuff. Double Major is next, where this you can copy target creature you control, except it isn't legendary if the spell is legendary. So imagine you just have a secondary copy of Ivy, so that way you have multiple Ivies on the field, 1, and 2, you'll have an extra trigger off your mutates. So that way you're going to be getting exponential value off your multiple Ivies. Faded Infatuation is next, a 3 blue mana instant where you put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of target creature you control. If it's your turn, you scry 2. But with this copy will create a legendary copy. The legendary rule will apply, technically speaking. With it though, you can still stack it to where you have the clone just go away, depending on if the first Ivy is either manipulated in some way that doesn't benefit you, Or if it's not beneficial for you to keep the first Ivy on the field, you can have the copy come onto play, and then you start stacking up those triggers once again. Glint is next. 2 mana for an instant that target creature you can control gets +0/+3 and gains hexproof until end of turn. So with this, a bigger booty on some of our creatures, and hexproof goes a long way, especially against our opponents targeting our creatures. Growth Spiral is next. Pretty standard for a Simic deck. For 2 mana, draw a card, you can put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. Hunter's Insight is next, 3 mana, where you can choose target creature you control, and when that creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker this turn, you draw that many cards. This is great value, especially if you have creatures with significantly higher power. That way you can draw some extra cards. But even so, Hunter's Insight just looks at power. So even if you need to draw just a couple of extra cards and just throw it on Ivy, or you can copy the spell as well and draw you some extra cards on top of it. Lazotep Plating is next, where you and permanents you control gain hexproof until end of turn, and you can amass 1. So with this, you yourself and your permanents control get hexproof until end of turn. So that way your opponents can't target you and they can't target your permanents. Negate's next. It's another standard card we're going to be adding in this deck. 2 mana to counter a target non-creature spell. Resculpt is next. Another 2 mana spell that this one exiles target artifact or creature, but its controller creates a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. Simic Charm is next. 2 mana for either target creature getting +3/+3 until end of turn. Permanents you control gain hexproof until end of turn, or you return target creature to its owner's hand. So you have, like I said before with Decisive Denial, this adds some flexibility to what you want to do. Just be wary too that even with hexproof, if you're going to be returning creatures to their owner's hands, Ivy will also see it and will probably go to its hand because the hexproof will not stop it from getting bounced to your hand. Snakeskin's Veil is next, a 1 green mana instant that puts a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, and it gains hexproof until end of turn. So as you see from the myriad of hexproof that we have on this deck is because we want to protect as much of Ivy and the rest of our creatures as we possibly can. Mutate can be a little fragile, especially if one of our creatures goes down with a giant stack of Mutate cards. It's going to be a little hard for us to get back. Supplant Form is next. 6 mana to return target creature to its owner's hand, and you can put a token on the battlefield that's a copy of that creature. So again, Ivy will see that and probably bounce to his hand, but there will be another copy of Ivy on the field, and you can do it for another creature your opponent control. Maybe a commander too, where you get their commander as well. Swallow Growth is next. 2 mana for target creature to get +2/+2 until end of turn, and you can put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So this works perfectly well in Lands Matter and Landfall decks, but I like this just for the extra +2/+2 boosts. And with Ivy targeting it, if you have multiple lands in your hand, you can just throw them onto the field. Wash Away is a great counter for not only just to counter a target spell, but for 1 mana to counter a target spell that wasn't cast from its owner's hand, aka from exile, or even from the command zone. So you can counter commanders coming into the field. Last of our instants is going to be Wild Size, where for 3 mana you have target creature get +2/+2 and gain trample till end of turn, and you can also draw a card. Our Sorceries is going to be the next category we'll be taking a look at. We're going to be looking at 11 Sorceries in this deck, but with these, I do feel with these Sorceries, this will put us a little bit over the edge too, as we have some fun things that we're going to be doing at its sorcery speed. Starting off with Creeping Renaissance. So with this, basically, we're gonna be able to get back anything that goes to the graveyard, and the most obvious target is gonna be our creatures. So if somebody just board wipes and gets rid of all of our Mutate cards and our Mutate creatures, we could just Creeping Renaissance to get them back. And the best part of it, it has flashback, so you can do it twice. Croaking Counterpart is next. 3 mana to create a token that's a copy of target non-frog creature, except it's a 1/1 green frog. And this one also has flashback, so we can make copies of Ivy and other cards that we throw on the field. Cultivate is another standard card we're going to be adding in this deck, where you can search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal those cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped, and the other one into your hand, then shuffle your library. Karn's Temporal Sundering is next. 6 mana for a legendary sorcery. So with this, you can only cast it if you control a legendary creature or planeswalker. a la either Ivy or Wilson on the field. And with this, target player takes an extra turn after this one, and you can return up to one target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, and then you exile the Temporal Sundering. So notice it says target non-land permanent, so you don't even have to target Ivy with it. You could just target a land, or you can target another non-creature permanent on the field, return that to the hand, and you can take that extra turn on top of it. Notorious Throng is next, and this is another one of our extra turn cards in budget. So 4 mana initially to create X 1/1 black fairy rogue creature tokens with flying, where X is the amount of damage you dealt to your opponents this turn. But if you cast it for its prowl cost, so for 6 mana, and the prowl cost can be only paid if you dealt damage to a player this turn, with a rogue, and Ivy is technically a rogue. So if you paid the prowl cost, you could take an extra turn after this one. Rampant Growth is another standard card where we're going to be searching our library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, tap, and then shuffle. Raven Form is next, and as you can tell, I absolutely love this card. I put it in almost every blue kit deck that I run now, where you can exile target artifact or creature, and its controller creates a 1/1 blue bird creature token with flying, and you can foretell it to play it at a later date and time. Regrowth allows you to return target card from your graveyard to your battlefield, so whatever necessary card you need in that moment, you just regrowth it back. Scale the Heights is next, and this is a very multifaceted card where you can put a +1/+1 counter on up to one target creature, gain 2 life, you can play an additional land this turn, and you can draw a card. So if you put the +1/+1 counter on any other creature that's not called Ivy, you can basically copy it, get another cast of Scale the Heights, draw an extra card, gain an extra 2 life, and then put another +1/+1 counter on Ivy. Slip Through Space is another really fun sorcery card where this has Devoid, which means this has no color, so it can't be countered by the most random counter spells. And for 1 blue, target creature can't be blocked this turn, and you draw a card. So again, same thing with Ivy. If you can cast it on another creature, Ivy will see it, and it will create the copy, and you can draw an extra card on top of it. And lastly, Stolen Identity, and I think this is going to be a really, really fun deck to run this with. For 6 mana, you create a token that's a copy of targeted artifact or creature, and then you can cipher it. So you can just use this to target or copy another one of your creatures, namely, let's just say the Pouncing Shore Shark, or if it's just not mutated or whatever, or another Putrefax or whatever. You could cipher it onto Ivy, and Ivy will see the target, make a copy, the targets themselves, makes another Ivy. This one is legendary, and then it'll cipher, so you can keep stacking extra fun cipher abilities onto Ivy, and get a myriad of fun little tokens. Our enchantments is the next category we're taking a look at. We're only running 9 enchantments, but for this, we want to get the most out of what we're going to be doing, and all of these are pretty much auras. So we're going to start off with Aqueous Form. 1 blue mana to enchanted creature. The enchanted creature can't be blocked, and when it attacks, you can scry 1. So same thing as what Ivy says, if a copy of an aura becomes a token, so you can put the token onto Ivy, make them unblockable. Auramancer's Gulse is next. This one pains me as the Ancestral Mask is now quite out of budget. But for this, 4 mana to enchant a creature, and it gets +2/+2 for each aura attached to it, and has Vigilance. So basically, if you're going to be piling up on your enchantments on one creature, Ivy will see that, put the copies on it, and then the guys will just see each aura or token aura attached to Ivy. Combat Research is next. Another 1 mana aura where you equip creature has when this creature deals combat damage to a player, you can draw 1. And as long as the enchanted creature is legendary, it gets +1/+1 and has Ward 1. So with this, Combat Research will give Ivy a bit of a fun little boost. An extra 1/1 is good, but the Ward 1 does help it a little bit, as you do have to pay 1 extra to target Ivy in this case, but better us wasting our opponent's mana rather than them just getting rid of it for cheap. Corrupted Conscience is next. 5 mana to enchant a creature, and you can control the creature. So you can target one of your opponent's creatures, Ivies will see it and it'll attach to themselves. The main important part of this is enchanted creature has Infect. So you can give Ivy Infect, and if you have Auramancer's Guise on it, it'll see it as another aura on top of it, so it gives it a +2/+2. And with combat research giving it another +1/+1, you could possibly kill somebody with Ivy and Corrupted Conscience on top of it. Curator's Ward is next, 3 mana to enchant a permanent. An enchanted permanent has hexproof, and when the enchanted permanent leaves the battlefield, if it was historic, you draw 2 cards. So historic means it's either an artifact, a legendary, or a saga. So in this case, we want to enchant our creatures with the Curator's Ward. That way Ivy will see it, give it protection, give itself hexproof, and then if it dies for whatever reason, you can draw those extra 2 cards on top of it. Eel Umbra is next, 2 mana for an aura that has flash. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1, and it has Totem Armor. So Totem Armor means if enchanted creature would be destroyed this way, instead you just remove all damage from it and destroy this aura. So you could it basically gives it a second life, but at the cost of it, we're falling off your commander. Followed Footsteps is next. 5 mana to enchanted creature, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you put a token that's a copy of enchanted creature onto the battlefield. So with this, if you can do it onto one of your other creatures as well. But when it targets Ivy, these tokens will be legendary. So you're gonna have the legendary rule will apply. So you're gonna have to sacrifice whichever Ivy you see fit and needed on the board itself. Snake Umbra is next, another Totem Armor aura that has the enchanted creature gets +1/+1, and has when this creature deals damage to an opponent, you can draw a card. Lastly, Traveler's Cloak. So this is one I just found when looking up this deck, and I thought this one was absolutely hilarious and too funny not to add in this deck. So for 3 mana, you can enchant a creature, and as it's coming into play, you choose a land. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card, and then enchanted creature has Landwalk of the chosen type. So let's just say if there's a populace for 1 land, you could choose that 1 land, and you can make everybody scared of you, especially having that Landwalk ability. Landwalk is not generally held in high regards, but for the fact it just gets around your opponents, it's so good, and you get in for some extra fun general and possibly infect damage as well. Our penultimate category is our artifacts. We're only running 3 artifacts, not too significant in this case, but the 3 we're running I feel are pretty significant in and of themselves. Kefnit's Monument is the first one, where blue creature spells you can cast cost 1 less to cast, so the commander tax will be reduced if you play this. And when you cast a creature spell, target creature an opponent control doesn't untap until during its controller's next untap step. So the significance of this basically meaning that it reduces your commander tax on Ivy whenever Ivy will die, and more than likely they will. But the Kefnit's Monument allows you to also keep an opponent's creature tapped down for however long you're casting creature spells. Swiftfoot Boots is a standard card in any commander deck where equipped creature has hexproof and haste, and you equip it 1. And Twinning Staff is the last one of this category, where it's 3 mana for an artifact. If you would copy a spell 1 or more times, instead of copying it that many times plus an additional time, you can choose new targets for an additional copy. So you can do an additional copy of whatever spell Ivy is going to be copying. And for 7 mana and tap, you copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You can have new targets for the copy. The 7 mana to tap is kind of overboard, but the main ability in Twinning Staff is just absolutely freaking hilarious. Basically just having a spell being copied and then copied again on top of Ivy. Everything is just so funny with Twinning Staff. Last category we're getting into is our land base, the fuel that drives our engine, the most important part of our deck, which is an arguable statement. But for this, we're running 34 lands. We're gonna start off with Blighted Woodland. Pretty common card I put in my deck, so sail along with me if you've seen this card before. You tap it for a generic mana, 3 and a green to tap it and sacrifice the Blighted Woodlands to search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. Command Tower is next, adds 1 mana of any color, our commander's color identity, which is very, very functional. Mirror Landscape is next. Again, like I mentioned with Blighted Woodlands, say it with me. Mirror Landscape enters the battlefield tapped. You tap it for a colorless, then 2 tap it and sacrifice the landscape to search your library for up to 2 basic land cards that share a land type, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. Rogue's Passage is another colorless land that allows us to have target creature can't be blocked this turn. So this will definitely help us with our infect win plan, and even that extra bit of commander damage will be very vital with Rogue's Passage. Temple of the False God, that adds two colorless mana as long as you have 5 or more lands. Yavimaya Coast comes in and taps for colorless, or you can add a green or a blue at the cost of 1 damage. And we're also running 14 forests and 14 islands. So that's how you build a Fairy Rogue that not only allows you to cast spells on them, but all your other creatures as well. And with our deck budget of $50, which includes the price of the commanders and excludes the price of the base clans, we're going to come up today with our total of $48.08, which currently makes this under budget. And without the overage compromise as well. So, like I said before, the overage compromise is there for if you guys need that extra $5 to make this kind of deck. But with the budget being super low and the deck price being super low, I should say, it's easy enough. You can fit whatever else you need to make up for that last $1.92. But I digress with this. We were able to build Ivy with a numerous amount of fun little things in it. But there are also some pros and cons we must address and some out-of-budget recommendations. So let's get started with our pros. So with this, it's a very unique playstyle with Ivy. I don't think I've ever had the privilege to play a deck like this in the same vein that, like, instead of one spell targeting your creatures to give your other creatures buffs, you can have one spell target a creature and then that spell can get copied for your commander, and then it's just such a fun and different approach to playing Simic and playing this kind of deck. I don't think I've ever seen it before, and in playtesting, it's quite unique. In every single experience, in every single game I've tested it on was very different, vastly different, and yields quite different and crazy results. There's also a great amount of ramp and card draw in this deck, which is significant, especially with green and blue, as those are the two main things that green and blue want to do with themselves, is ramp a lot and draw a lot of cards. That way you're getting a lot of information and you're thinning out your deck, most importantly. And it's a very fun avalanche commander that gets really scary. I use the term avalanche commander as most of these spells are like 2, 3, even 1 mana, and that way they're like cantrips almost. You can just start throwing down spells, start throwing down auras or anything like that, and keep just stacking them on top of Ivy. That way, not only one creature is going to be super huge, another creature can be super huge, the rest of your creatures can be super huge, something along the veins of that. And some of our cons in this case, and all of these are quite glaring. So if your opponents do see Infect, you're as good as dead, because for the most part, you need 21 commander damage to kill somebody. And they're at 40 life, generally speaking, unless you're playing 1v1. But for Infect, it's 10. So 10 damage is significant, and for the most part, 10 damage goes a long way in a commander game. If you have 10 poison counters, you automatically lose the game. With that, if your opponents see Infect, they're more than likely going to team up against you to get you off the field. Another con in this is that damage is our only win con. We don't have any combos. We don't have any interactions that are any way out of damage that'll kill our opponents. But with this deck is just basically based on just cantrips and just throwing auras on your creatures and just buffing up a couple of small creatures instead of just having one ginormously huge commander. And the most glaring one of our cons is that opponent spells also target Ivy. So we have to keep that in mind as well. That's one of the main reasons why I was adding so many hexproof creatures. So that way, if your opponents will decide to polymorph or they decide to exile a creature, that will also target Ivy as well. So in order for us to avoid that, we have to make sure Ivy has hexproof, or in some way just completely just avoid blowing us out of the water and getting rid of Ivy. We need to make sure that Ivy has hexproof at almost every single case. And with that being said, we come into the last part of our video, which is our out-of-budget recommendations. So you've seen we built this deck for a budget of $50, and you've seen the results. But with these out-of-budget recommendations, we can throw in 4 extra cards in there if you want to go above and beyond the $50 limit and add some really cool cards. The first of which is going to be Eldrazi Conscription. Where with this, it is 8 mana, and I did consider this over Colossification, but Colossification has the creature tap itself. But with this, +10/+10, Trample and Annihilator 2, that is probably 3 of the scariest things you can read on a card. +10, especially on a commander, Trample and Annihilator. Annihilator is easily one of the saltiest things that players see on the field, where they have to sacrifice 2 permanents anytime you attack them. This will put Ivy over the edge, especially with how scary they'll be. And especially so, you're going to have a lot of fun with them. Next up is Triumph of the Hordes. With this would have been an easy ad if it wasn't $19, a good near half of our budget. Triumph of the Hordes would have been absolutely perfect to just have a game-ending win, have all your creatures gain Infect, Trample, and just swing in for big. Vesuvian Duplimacy is next. And basically, whenever you cast a spell that targets only a single artifact or creature you control, you create a token that's a copy of that artifact or creature, except it's non-legendary. So this would be the MVP of this deck. Anytime you're casting something that targets a creature and Ivy sees it, you're gonna get basically 2 tokens on top of it. And the tokens for Ivy are gonna be non-legendary. So each one of those, and then each one preceding that will create more copies and more copies and more copies. Again, I would have added this if this wasn't $11. Last of our recommendations is going to be Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. Obviously, for the fact that Sakashima can just come into play as a copy of any creature, and for the fact the legendary rule does not apply to permanents we control. So our copy spells will just keep copying and copying Ivies. That way we're getting multiple Ivies. We're gonna get multiple ways to just go completely wild and crazy with this deck. And that's gonna do it for me today, guys. What do you guys think of Ivy Gleeful Spelltheif? Do you like this kind of deck? Are there any cards that I'm missing, or were there any cards that you don't agree with? Hit me up in the comments down below. And if you like this kind of content and you want to support the channel, by all means, just like this video, share amongst your friends, your playgroup, and whoever else you might know who likes this kind of content. Subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell icon, because not only would I appreciate it, but it'll help the channel grow and get a lot more eyes for avid fans like yourselves to watch this kind of content and help the channel grow even further. And you can also follow me on my socials. The links will be on the bottom left-hand side of your screen, and the active links will be in the show notes down below. But you have my Twitter, you have my Facebook, and you have my Instagram there, all of which I am very, very active on. And you can if you have any suggestions for future decks, or any future videos, whether it be this, a gameplay video, or an entire discussion video in and of itself, don't be shy to hit me up on there, because I am very active and I will take any suggestions that you may have for any future videos. One last thing before I let you guys go. Normally I post every week, but the last couple of weeks I've been a little wishy-washy with that. So I'm going to be posting every week for the foreseeable future. And with that, I'm going to leave you guys off there. Enjoy Dominaria United. Thank you guys so much. If you made it this far, I truly appreciate it. And consider, once again, subscribe to the channel. That's going to be it for me. That's going to be it for me today, guys. Thank you so much. Enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you guys here next week for a brand new video. And until then, guys, cheers, everybody.